obviously you're a drummer because you just drummed.
That's true.
That's one thing, though.
That is, I made some noise. Yeah,
you made some noise with the drums, and I'm a little deaf now. But also you teach sociology at University of Central Florida.
Yeah.
You're probably the smartest drummer in the universe.
No, that's not true.
No?
But I try.
You're a pretty smart guy. You try, but that's the end goal.
Yeah, I
don't want to be the best drummer. Be the smartest drummer. And I don't know. We're friends. Conversations usually go from geeky to super intellectual and music.
Yeah. I guess it's wherever the conversation takes us, right?
Yeah. Well, you brought up something cool because you're teaching a course right now, right? Does
Yeah.
This have something to do with it? This book you brought?
Oh, yeah. So I brought this book as an example. Okay, so one of the classes I teach, because I teach sociology, I teach social theory. So basically, it's just talking about what a bunch of old dead white dudes said like a couple hundred years ago about society, and then just like coming up with the theories, and teaching them to a bunch of people. Some of them, asleep, some of them paying attention. I think teaching is probably my favorite thing to do.
You're teaching people who are they're taking the class because they're going to that field?
Yeah, it's like one of the cornerstone classes. So
Gotcha.
When you get to the end of your degree program, you have like a few of the final courses that are kind of like your check marks there. That's one of the big dog classes, I guess.
Gotcha.
So I'm lucky I get to teach it.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty big responsibility because one of these days you're going to be one of those dead white guys, right?
That is something I will be in the future. Yeah.
There's going to be a whole
I don't
generation after you.
Yeah,
That's gonna be
that's
like,
true.
yeah, Doug Charles, he was a really good drummer, but you know what he was really good at? Modern
Talking
social
on
theory.
podcasts.
Yeah, talking on podcasts.
Yeah. So I guess yeah, I mean, we're gonna talk about something. I'm gonna talk about in that class a couple weeks from now, and
Teach me
I
your
promise
course.
if it gets
Just
too
tell me.
boring, you can just like cut me off. Just throw
I don't
something
think
at
it's
me.
going to be boring because the first thing you said to me today was something about simulations.
Yeah. So like, I think you asked me, you're like, do you think everybody's living in a simulation? And I said, I don't know, but there's a theorist that talks about stuff like that would be perfect for that discussion. And so his name is Jean Baudrillard. Now, there's probably a more correct French way of saying it. He's French.
It's Baudrillard.
Yeah, a little bit more thrown in there.
That's what it is, yeah,
but I'm going to
for sure.
butcher his name for the purposes of this
Cool.
conversation.
Good, keep doing it.
He's well known as kind of like he's actually kind of like a troll, like an internet troll
Really?
of theory. Yeah, he said a bunch of like controversial stuff, including stuff like the Gulf War didn't happen, which is obviously a terrible thing to say.
Wow. Wait,
Yeah.
So he's doing this as a joke, though. Like, he doesn't
it's
believe
part of his
that?
larger theory. I'll get into it later.
Okay, all right.
But he has a bunch of controversial claims like science is dead, sociology is dead. He just starts with all these dramatic claims. And so it seems like he's just kind of being like a jerk, basically. But I think he has some cool ideas, even though he's dead now. I think you can apply a lot of it to social media and a lot of the stuff we deal with today.
So what's his broader theory? Like, what is he basing all this conspiracies off of? Or whatever?
It sounds like a conspiracy, right?
Whatever these ideas.
He says that all right, so you know what a simulation of something is, right?
Right. I mean, I think of The Sims.
Yeah. It's like a simulation of real life. Yeah.
Right, but I also like the idea of like some kind of program it's running, The Matrix, things like that, maybe.
Yeah,
get
like The
into.
Matrix. So the movie The Matrix was actually inspired by his like biggest work.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, and like one of the earliest scenes, when Neo's like in his bedroom in front of the computer, he actually puts this book Simulacra and Simulation in one of the drawers. And the Wachowski siblings actually required everybody to read the book that was working on the movie.
Whoa, Easter egg. That seems like a pretty like dense book. It's not big, but
It's
from the title, it doesn't. I don't feel like it's a breeze through.
Oh yeah. So
Right.
I guess I'll just start with some of the basics. So like, if you think of a simulation, right, you think of a representation of something,
Okay.
and you can expand that to like an actual simulation, like I don't know, being in a flight sim or something like that.
All right. Yeah. Sure.
But you can also expand it to things like your name. Your name is a symbol of you, a representation of you,
Okay.
right? If somebody reads it, they think of you. What Baudrillard says is that we moved on from focusing on symbols, but now we are in simulacra, which are symbols of symbols.
Holy shit! It's like a
Yeah.
symbol inception.
It's like a symbol without an original, basically, a copy of a copy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know it sounds
No.
crazy. I'll give you a few examples.
Well, because at first you like you said, like, the name, right? Your name is really your identity,
Yeah.
right? And so you start talking about things that are more abstract.
Yeah.
So you're a copy of a copy.
Yeah, it gets, it's kind of a, I don't know, we'll get into it a little bit here, but a good example I like to use is back in the day, right? They're making movies, right? They have scenes where horses are galloping across fields, right?
Yeah.
But they don't have the sound equipment, or maybe they just don't have the time or money to actually record the sounds of hooves going across the field. So they use sound effects. They use
Foley
coconuts,
or whatever.
whatever they can find, that classic coconut sound, right? What ends up happening is the audience gets so used to hearing that with horses that when they later develop the technology to accurately record horses, people that aren't familiar with what horses sound like think it's fake, that it's dubbed over.
Whoa, so they're actually more associated with a fake reference
Yeah.
or simulation of horse hooves.
Well,
than
in this
the
case,
actual ones.
yeah, and so now they've gone from a simulation to a simulacra. They are more enchanted with
Okay. Gotcha.
the fakeness is more real than what's real. It's what he calls hyper real. I know.
Because I mean, really, everything that's perception's everything, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's another thing he's going to talk about too. But some other examples would be models, right? So think of like your
Like supermodels?
yeah, supermodels, right, on front of
Instagram models.
yeah, magazines, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them end up getting photographed, right, under certain lights, very specific conditions, but they also get photoshopped.
Right.
Yeah, and they actually get changed to the point where they can see themselves in the magazine and be like, well, that's not really me, right?
Yeah.
So if we're all basing our appearances, our body types off of something that's not even real in the first place, we're basically chasing something that's not even true.
Yeah. So that could have like really severe psychological effects on you, right?
Yeah, because you're basing your body image off of a copy of something that's not even true.
Damn. Something you can never actually, like, if you desire that beautiful girl, it's not going to happen because she doesn't exist.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could think about it that way, but also for the person, right? So think of the model.
But for the person seeing themselves.
The model isn't themselves anymore.
Got you.
You can hear this with like musicians and stuff, right? They copy themselves. That's what a recording is, right? Like in the studio, right? We record ourselves. Maybe we edit it, so it's no longer exactly real. Maybe it's just that one performance. And then when we go out and play live, we're chasing that copy. Or at least some bands do, right? You'll hear bands talk about how they need to sound more like themselves, or audiences say like they didn't sound right.
Yeah, because they listen to the album. And
Yeah,
then they go hear them live, and it's never a good thing where it's like they didn't sound like the album, you know?
Yeah, there are some bands though that say like, screw that, right? They're gonna be like, we're not trying to sound like the record, right? But you never know. You might have a fan that goes there and is like, I don't understand why Smashing Pumpkins played like a 20-minute drone guitar solo in the middle of their song. And it's like, you don't get, right? They're not going to bother chasing something that isn't even really them, right? They're there. That's them. That's the Smashing Pumpkins.
Today, now, like at that moment.
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
them trying to be a recording or anything they ever were before.
Yeah, so he one of the examples he uses in his work is like, it's based off a fairy tale. He basically stole a fairy tale to use as an example.
Sweet.
But it's about this king, right?
Okay.
He's got this kingdom, right? And
as kings do.
Yes, and he's miring his kingdom, right? But he's like, I just can't see it too well. I want to really know my kingdom, like how wide it is, what's going on in it.
Okay.
So he hires a cartographer, someone who makes maps, and he says, hey, can you make me a map of my kingdom so that I can stare in awe at everything I own, right? And the map maker's like, sure. They make a big map. King sees it and says, yeah, I don't know. I can't really see those trees over there. It's not really big enough. I want a big map so I can kind of really feel how big it is. And so map maker goes back and makes a bigger map, makes more detail. And because it's like a fantasy story, this map part gets ridiculous. Like the cartographer ends up making a map so big.
It's like the size of the actual.
It's the size of the actual kingdom. It's just a perfect replica. Yeah. And what ends up happening is the king and the people in the kingdom spend more time in the map than they do in the original. And what ends up happening is the original turns to dust. It becomes a desert underneath it. So now there's no original. So that line that Morpheus says when Neo meets him, welcome to the desert of the real. That's quote from that. Yeah.
Oh.
The desert of the real. So the originals aren't there anymore. It's a very like it's kind of a dark way of looking at
Desert
things.
of the real. Yeah, it is. It is dark, right? It's like that. Like because the main fear of like anything simulation is like, or like reality.
Yeah.
Is like nothing matters, or like this is all just. It leaves you with these weird questions, right? Like, well, then what is reality?
I think it's kind of disturbing and it's angering sometimes. I mean, I think you can see it when you see people's reactions to reality TV. You know, reality TV is something that there's people that like it, but it's almost like a begrudging like. It's like kind of guilty pleasure.
It's like guilty pleasure.
And then you have like a camp of people that just despise it.
Yeah, I'm in that camp.
Yeah, and then there's people like me who despised it and started hate watching it, and now I actually like it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Hate watching.
But yeah, so let's talk about why reality TV has that reaction. Why do you think?
Why do people hate it?
Yeah.
Maybe if I think of something specific, like a specific show, like anything that's like Big Brother or like the Kardashians, like where it's like people living in their day-to-day lives kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Part of that, I would say that really irks me is one, it still seems dramatized. So it's supposed to be reality TV, but it's like dramatized reality TV. Like it's like reality dramatized, right?
Yeah. So like reality in like quotation marks. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other side of that coin is the things that make me watch and things that make people watch the most are the ones that are just the things that happen that are the most ridiculous. You know, like Honey Boo Boo was the most ridiculous like person ever on TV to me. Mm-hmm. And I think things like that, it has to get, you know, those kinds of characters have to be so exaggerated and like blown out of proportion. Like, I hope she's not real, but the fact that she might be real, I have to watch this.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if you could get like one of those like reality stars on the podcast and talk to them about that. Because I feel like you would get a lot of these same ideas of who are you playing? Are you playing yourself? Are you playing a character of yourself?
Yeah.
What's real, right? And then when people meet you, which you are they meeting? Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that comes up in this theory is that there's no longer just you. There's tons of yous that become decoupled from you or taken apart from you. Like the Stu on your podcast, or the Stu on your Facebook or your Instagram, from his perspective, even though he wasn't really alive for social media. He would probably say these are different yous that you must now reconcile somehow. How do you deal with that?
It's like the roles more like.
So like you could look at roles as like different aspects of the same person, right?
Yeah.
Different things you put on, different masks in a way. But he's talking about something where you might be chasing a version of yourself in an image, right? That was never even real in the first place. Mm-hmm. So maybe you cultivate a personality on Facebook of being like the funny guy, right? Or the one that talks about politics a lot. People kind of know you as that person. Mm-hmm. What happens if you don't feel like, what if you want to post something sad? Yeah, or post.
Well, it's always a big deal when someone gets established in like any kind of community, especially on social media stuff, as being like, this is the right-wing political person that I listen to, you know? Mm-hmm. But like, God forbid they change their views, their whole life is, or like they change something about themselves. It doesn't have to be politics, it could be anything. They could be like, I'm the makeup girl on YouTube, and she's like, fuck it, I'm tired of doing makeup. I want to be in a scream band or something.
So you might hear somebody say, I miss the old you.
Yeah,
right. Like, it's just a different person. They're not being themselves, right? And so it's kind of troubling to think about it that way. What is funny, though, is this theorist, he was asked to help make the second Matrix.
What?
So after the first Matrix came out, the Wachowski siblings like asked him. Like,
wait, what year did he pass away? So he was fairly recent then.
I think he passed away like early 2000s because he wrote about 9/11.
So like maybe MySpace came out.
Maybe, I don't know.
Not even
I feel like he would have had a field day though. He would have loved to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, right. That's crazy. Okay. So
so
Matrix came out in 99.
They say like, what did you think about it? You know, we made this movie based off your work. What do you think? And he said he hated it.
Oh no shit.
He said that it completely missed the point.
Oh wow.
Yeah, must be terrible, right? To make an entire movie based off of.
I'm sure that they were very happy with everything else, but like, yeah, if you're like, this is like you want that person to really just be like, awesome, you totally got it.
Yeah.
So it's got to be a little bit like
his deal. So the reason why he didn't like it is because in the Matrix, for those who haven't seen it, right? There's, I guess this is spoilers, right?
Yeah, if they haven't seen it, it's
It's past the spoiler limit.
Like,
yeah, okay.
I'm lost for words if you haven't seen The Matrix.
So yeah, basically, it's humanity is what the reality that we think is real is actually a virtual reality.
Right.
And the true us is
plugged
into like a pod, and our body
Right.
warmth is
We
harvested by a race of evil alien robots. Right.
We're in some like fake embryo
Yeah.
and plugged into a computer.
I guess they're not alien robots, but yeah, robots. Yeah, and so it's all simulated.
Right,
And
yeah.
so the big reveal in the movie, which is pretty early on, right, is Morpheus reveals like reality is a lot different than you think it is. You're living in this virtual reality, and there's a true one that your body is kind of locked away in, right?
Right.
He says that that's too optimistic. He
Holy
says the
shit.
original is gone
Oh.
because the copy was of something that never existed.
Wait. So his thing, the major difference here is that the original doesn't exist anymore. Because generally when we think about simulations, we think like
You're basing off something.
like something for like some part of me is somewhere else that's not being utilized.
Yeah.
But in this case, like that original is gone. Mm-hmm. Wow.
I mean, I don't know what he would do to change the movie to make it more like in his vision, but the idea that you can like take a pill and now see the world for how it really is,
Yeah.
he says is too optimistic. It's gone. He says that we've based the simulation we have is a simulation of another simulation. So
Right.
we're so far down the chain.
He's really thinking about people as data.
I mean, you could think about it
right?
that way, yeah.
Like what makes Doug Charles is like a series of zeros and ones, and you can copy and paste that, or cut and paste it.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and change something about it, and the original's gone, kind of a thing, maybe.
Yeah. I
don't
mean,
know.
I don't know. It's just weird stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
not everybody agrees with it, right? It's kind of out there, and like I said, he's kind of he's a little bit of a button pusher, right? Like I said with the Gulf War thing. So
Yeah.
he said when the Gulf War was like kind of gearing up, he said that it wouldn't happen. He said that it would all be kind of a farce.
Yeah. So he said even though, so he says that he remains that it never did happen.
He said he agrees that people died, right?
Uh-huh.
That people fought, that national conflict occurred.
Yeah.
But the Gulf War that we saw, that we're taught, that we know, didn't necessarily play out in the way it did in like the news, right?
Okay.
Like, so the people that are watching it in the news, they're hearing about this conquest, right? You know, U.S. versus Saddam. They're going to battle. There's going to be a winner. Somebody's going to be defeated. The problem's going to be solved. And that's what we're kind of sold, play by play in the news and the media.
Yeah.
But what ends up actually happening is not much necessarily changes in the region, right? Like it's not so much a cut and dry war where there was a clear victor, right? And that the objectives met. It all becomes kind of a stage play, a kind of practice war almost. And the message we get as viewers is different from what's actually going on the ground. It's very different from like the Vietnam War, right? Where like Vietnam War was special because we knew that there was some bad stuff going on in wars, but we were so detached from it from far away, right? We had to kind of left our imagination. But the Vietnam War rolls around, we see the footage, we hear the stories, we realize, oh man, I don't know if we're the good guys, like what's going on?
Right.
Baudrillard says that we've gone from a society of not enough information to too much information. So now it's almost tragic that it's harder to find the truth.
It's like
because there's too much
the
to
whole
pick from.
misinformation thing.
Yeah.
Like that's the problem now. It's not the lack. It's fake news.
Yeah, instead of picking which thing is the most accurate or true, it's like picking whatever toppings you like on pizza. It's the taste. You know what I mean? Which reality do you want?
Which one do you prefer?
Because there's so many. Yeah.
Oh God.
And to point to like a correct one is almost impossible.
And so when it comes to the Gulf War, people have different perspectives.
He was saying that versus what actually happened, like in what he would call like political reality, or where people actually died on the war. Like he acknowledges all of that suffering. He doesn't like it, but he says that the war as a narrative, right, of what happens, the one that we were told isn't the case.
Right.
It's kind of a piece of theater or film.
And it's something it is our reality.
It is a reality.
It is a reality. If that's kind of
it's kind of cold and awful to look at it that way, but it's an interesting perspective from him. And so you can look at similar things when you talk about like after 9/11, right?
Yeah.
So after 9/11 happens, you get this kind of hornet nest that got kicked. Everybody's mad.
Right.
Who did it? Got to find the villain, right?
Right.
They've
Good
done,
versus evil.
yeah, I did a paper on this, but if you read things like Scientific American during that time or military magazines or news magazines, they would tell you about the US's plan to strike back. And they would have like these segments talking about like the US's equipment. They talk about like the C-130's destructive capability. And they would have all these diagrams of, we're going to bomb this headquarters under this mountain. And they would draw it all. But they didn't know exactly what they looked like. They were kind of going off guesswork. And so in a sense, the version of the war that we got back here was, in his argument at least, theater. It was like an image of a war. Right. It was like a story that we told.
It was totally a constructed narrative.
Yeah.
That made it easy for people to...
Exactly. It fits with this idea of vanquishing evil, of the U.S. being powerful.
Yeah.
And he even says that all the conspiracies that popped up around 2000, the 9/11, you know how people were like, jet fuel can't melt steel beams, the government did it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
He says that
crazy.
He says that those conspiracies, some people view them as like, how could you say such terrible things about the government? He says that that the people that believe those conspiracies, they're swept up in the idea that the U.S. is completely in control. So it's kind of a way for them to preserve the feeling that the United States still has control of everything.
Like that there is like this, this central power that it's easy to be like, that, it's clear cut, like you can really rest easy at night being like, it's obvious.
Yeah, it's
they
like,
have the power.
They didn't hit me.
Yeah.
I let them hit me.
Yeah.
I set it up. You know what I mean?
Right,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, so he says that, like, that's what one of his last writings, actually, is Spirit of Terrorism, and he talks about 9/11, and that's one of his points. He says that the reason why people go for that conspiracy is because it's easier to believe that than to reconcile the fact that, the United States isn't this dominant actor completely in control of the global stage.
Is this book hard to get through? Like,
it's so hard to get through.
Is
oh
it?
My God. It's translated from French. If you've ever read like academic stuff translated from French, it's like...
I haven't.
It's like reading just run-on sentences that go in circles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. Obviously, it's kind of like nerdy stuff to talk about. What other nerdy things do you want to talk about?
I don't know, dude. Simulations to me are just like, because ever since, there's people today that are like, Elon Musk scared the shit out of everybody because he sounds like a robot. And I think the quote was, "Resistance is futile," on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Is that what he said?
That's what he said when they're talking about like simulations or no, AI. That's what it was. And and then he said, "Yeah, we all live in a simulation." So I'm just kind of like, well, this guy's just basically privatized Mars travel already, so he probably knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's not like I feel if we were talking about this in, I don't know, the early 2000s, 90s.
Resistance is futile is a Star Trek reference. It's the Borg. That's why they're talking about the AI.
Oh, okay. Resistance is futile. I just got some great information.
Nice.
Yeah. Star Trek. She's a huge Star Trek Trekkie.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But I lost my train of thought. Where was I at?
Oh, yeah. You're talking about Elon Musk, right?
Yeah, Elon.
And resistance is futile and how kind of scary simulation type stuff was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess...
Oh, yeah, no, if we were talking about this, 20 years ago, I feel like it would be, straight conspiracy. No one would be like, yeah, obviously there's a chance at simulation. It would just... Now I feel like there's a chance. It could be a thing. It's with the way technology is evolving.
Have you ever heard of transhumanism before?
No.
It's kind of like this... you could call it a political movement, right? It's this idea that we can defeat the human condition, right? All the problems, finding purpose, the fact that we die... the fact that we're not really sure what we should be doing, we're limited by our form. They believe that we can defeat that through technology. So some basic forms of transhumanism, right, would be like, I'm missing a limb, I can replace it with a robotic one, right?
Okay.
Or even if I'm not missing a limb, I could replace my limb with a better limb.
Right. May not even be a hand. It could be.
Yeah, I could enhance myself, right?
Cyborg.
And you can take this all the way to, all right, well, if death is such a problem, and all these issues, we have living in this physical world, why not put everybody in a server?
Right, just upload them to a server, and then that's the thing with the idea of, back to the idea of self, though.
Yeah.
It's even if your body doesn't die or whatever, you're not the same person you were 20 years ago.
No.
And 100 years from now, God forbid 1,000 years from now, if you're whatever you are is still evolving through all that time, you're not. You basically died.
Yeah, but I think the way you phrase that question is is interesting too, because
What
it
is that?
kind of reveals a contradiction. It's like
What is it?
you, subject, aren't the same person
Right.
you were.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like I was. That was me. So what stayed the same, right?
Right.
Yeah, and if you did put somebody in a simulation while their real person was still there, eventually they would accrue different experiences and become different people, right?
Right.
That's kind of like the clone thing.
Change your biology, even like if you were a cyborg, all of a sudden your personality would change.
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think we should all beam up inside the cloud and just hang out?
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably do
Maybe we
anything
already
in the
did.
cloud. Oh my god.
Wait. We're this Apple.
It's hyper reality.
This is the Apple. This is the Apple server.
Yeah. But
Steve Jobs didn't die. He actually just came into the simulation for a while to introduce us to Apple.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I mean, there's a bunch of sci-fi books that all talk about that kind of stuff.
Wow. Fuck.
Yeah. So what else do you want to talk about?
Yeah, man. I don't know. We're going down a deep tunnel.
I know. Let's get up for air.
Let's get up. Hey, Zach, what time are we at? Oh, he's fired.
Eliminated.
No, I was just looking at it. We're at 30 minutes.
Okay, let's take a quick break.
Okay, cool.
And then we'll come back and we'll have a bunch of things to discuss. And now a few words about our sponsor. Castledor Studios is a music production house located in Orlando, Florida, and it's where I choose to record episodes of The Orange Lando Show. The studio features a blend of vintage and modern equipment and can accommodate musical artists of any genre, voiceover recordings, and, of course, podcasts. They can help with anything audio related. Castledor Studios offers free tours. Come check out their amazing facility for free. There's nothing to lose. They also offer free open house events like their monthly songwriter night where artists share and critique each other's work. It's free, people. Every session you book with Castledor Studios will be professional, private, and inspiring. If you have a creative idea, take action now and contact Castledor Studios at castledorstudios.com. Use reference code OrangeLando to receive a 10% discount on your first booking. All right, back to the show. Let's talk about some man shit.
Yeah. I brought that up as a topic. We could talk about about manhood.
Manhood.
So what do you think? What do you think the current state of manhood is today?
Oh, compared to like
what's the weather forecast for manhood?
So if I had to, maybe, can I draw like a contrast to like what it maybe I think it used to be?
Yeah, sure.
Will that help? Would that help? You know?
Yeah.
Because I identify like classical manhood as like caveman shit up to, between like the real hardcore physical caveman shit to the business CEO startup of like the early 20th century, like those kinds of like they're smoking cigarettes in like their boardrooms and fucking yelling at people and being racist.
They're both men.
They're both men.
Don Draper or whatever from Mad Men. They're both men, right? But they're like different versions, I guess, right?
Right.
So when I was a kid, there was this book. My friend told me to get it. And I thought it was like the funniest thing ever. I think it was by, I can't remember what his first name is, but Maddox. He did this book called Alphabet of Manliness.
Alphabet of Manliness?
Yeah, and every letter is like a different like manhood
adjective
thing.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, like one might be like combat or battle or muscles, It's,
yeah, right.
And I thought it was hilarious, right? Because it's kind of like this exaggerated, funny version of manhood, right? And then I remember my dad telling me, he'd be like, Doug, you know what it means to be a man? It means doing things you don't want to do.
That's what being a man is?
Like stuff that you don't feel like doing,
right.
You just do it.
Just do
He's
it.
like, that's what being a man is. And so, I mean, obviously.
They say man up, right?
Yeah, I guess
like,
so. Yeah,
right.
Right.
I guess that
So I'm like thinking, I don't know if I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want this manhood thing. Can I opt out?
Right.
Can I do the other one where you get to do the things you want?
Yeah.
But I know it's interesting, right? So they're different definitions.
Uh-huh.
And you'll see people come to blows about it almost. Like people will fight. They'll get mad about what being a man is.
Like especially men, like,
Yeah,
specifically, right? Because there's like it's been a while, but I've seen like threads, conversations on like Reddit or something like that with like men like talking shit about other men, saying they're not. You're not like if you eat like I remember a big one was like I was trying to like
soy boy, right?
Find like meat alternatives, and so I was trying a lot of soy products. I found this thing that was like if you like all these like super I don't know, I guess testosterone heavy like muscle heads. I don't know. I imagine them just like basically being an Neanderthal. I don't know,
just beating the keyboard with a club.
Yeah, just yelling at the computer. And apparently I'm not a man because I eat soy.
Yeah, like they have like this almost like myth, right, in some of those communities that like, it's weird. It's kind of so they'll look at the ingredients. They'll be like, "Whoa, hold on, soy has like estrogens in it. That means it will make you a woman."
Yeah.
But it's like phytoestrogens, which aren't the same as like, yeah.
And actually, because I worked at a vegan restaurant, and we were very informed on like all these common misconceptions, and people all the time would be like. Say, oh, I don't want anything with soy, and I'd be like, you have an allergy, and they'd be like, no, I just, I don't want the best of my testosterone.
Yeah.
And so we had handout papers over there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
And it talked about how phytoestrogen. How do you say?
Yeah,
it?
I think it's phytoestrogen. I could be wrong on this.
But yeah, it's
sure,
that the molecule that's inside of soy that's similar to estrogen,
but it's not the same as.
Like, but actually, what it does is it attack, and I used to be a chemist, so I'm really good at explaining this.
Oh, yes.
But it actually attaches to the same receptors as estrogen does. But because it's not really estrogen, it actually lowers your estrogen count.
It was blocking it.
And so it's actually doing the opposite of what the naysayers say. So if you eat soy, you're more likely to get less estrogen.
But these are, I think what's interesting, because, right, if we take it at like, if we just are sitting here like trying to establish like truth versus like false, we can just write it off and be like, these people are idiots, right? They do their research. But I do think there's something about it that says something. I think it's this fear of manhood being lost. That like society or men in society are losing manhood. That there's some sort of deep manliness, in this case testosterone, that makes men,
right,
is disappearing, and society's in crisis.
I will say that I can see the reason for that fear is very plausible. Or I can see that as justified reason to an extent. Yeah. To be fearful of like losing something that's always been identified as manly, like the whole labor force thing. The fact that the labor force is going away, and that the world only really people survived off of like the physical labor they did, and so men were valued highly for just having high levels of testosterone and being strong.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was like the whole idea that like there was like this cultural belief you saw across a lot of different cultures of like men being like a sole provider. Right, that men are the breadwinners, right? And you see that kind of exaggerated in, like we said, the 50s, right? This idea that women are confined to the private sphere, men are allowed to run around in the public sphere and make money, women have to take care of children and all this. That's like their only function, right? And nowadays we look back at that and we're like, yikes. I mean, sure, there's some people that are like, oh, I wish that, but...
I want to be the woman.
yeah. So, but like, if you're a guy that wanted to be in that position, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not necessarily an option.
No.
And if you're a woman that wanted to be in the other position, it's not really an option, right? And so what you kind of had to see was this old version of manhood, because now we need 2-income families. Now people want to do other things rather than just have their gender decide what they do with their life, right?
Sure. Yeah, fair enough.
There's this question of like, all right, well, if we revolved manhood around all these things, then what is it once we take those away? And so people are, I think currently in society, what we're dealing with is kind of a redefinition. You have a lot of conflicting ideas of what it means to be a man, people building their own, kind of testing them, and just like it's always been over time, battling different forms of manhood, seeing which one's best.
So what's manhood today?
I don't know.
Well, okay, here's a good one.
Yeah.
If you're gonna go do man shit today with your friends, you just have a boys' night, or a boys' day, whatever, a boys' weekend. What would you do? What would the boys go do?
I don't know, because I think it's
that
different.
would be different than what women would do. Maybe I don't know if that's a good way to try it.
I think that's a good way to think about it, because it depends on who you're asking, right? So for some of my friends, a couple of my friends are more familiar with like the frat background, right?
Sure.
So when they think of hanging with the boys, they think of drinking.
Yeah.
They think of, all right, we can't talk about our feelings. But once we're drunk,
Yeah.
Now we can tell each other how much we love each other and hug, right?
Yeah, right.
You break down those barriers of men can't touch, men can't expose their feelings, right?
Right.
And so for him, for at least a couple of my friends, right, that's like their idea of having like a boys trip, right? For somebody else, it might be playing video games all weekend.
Right.
You know what I mean? For somebody else, it might be going out being a lumberjack or fighting bears. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these different versions. And we all kind of talk about manhood. Like we all know we're saying the same thing. But I think there's a lot of disagreements and I think there's a lot of conflict over it.
Well, now it's like another thing where it's not, like you said, it's depending on who you ask, you get a different answer. And it's like when you say this is what the boys go and do, there's probably a group of girls out there that like doing the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, like I like to go, you know, play video games and drink beer.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's
I'm
nothing
sure
about
there's
those
girls
activities
groups
that are
they're
like intrinsically
right.
like man.
Yeah.
But they become associated with that. Yeah. Like for instance, pink and blue, right?
Kind of like this though.
Like today, like right, we think of pink as like a
Oh,
girl
right,
color,
yeah.
blue is a boy color. Well, it was like reversed a few decades ago in the United States.
Pink was a
boy color. So like the babies that were born in the hospital,
Yeah.
boys would be put in pink outfits, girls would be put in blue outfits because blue was a feminine passive color.
oh
And then it got flipped.
yeah,
And it's kind of weird.
Majorly, yeah.
Yeah, because from my perspective, before I knew that, I'd be like, well, duh, pink's just a
light
girl
red
thing. Come on. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then it
Pink's
becomes,
yeah.
So yeah, I just think that's just kind of interesting, right? So when you ask like, what's the state of manhood? I don't know. I think it's always been in a state of flux, but I think that's especially apparent now.
Yeah. And if it was before, like there wasn't a lot of other, like there were certain things you had to do, right?
Yeah.
And that made you a man, right? That's kind of what your dad had to say.
Yeah.
But now, like you don't have to do those things to be a man. Like you don't have to have a laborer's job, or you can be a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah. So we've broken the barriers. We've
Yeah.
defined manhood differently now.
Yes.
But for some men, they would hold that against that guy. They would say that's
Right.
not being a man. Being a man's being in charge, being in control, making the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for the other guy, he's like, I don't feel like a man. What are you talking about? Like, this is me. This is how I define it.
I think now that maybe we'll sum up this whole little snippet conversation with something around these lines. But the problem is probably just my guess, is that you don't need to define manhood or be identified with whatever you think manhood is at all anymore.
You can kind of build it your own.
That's kind of, well, it's just like a category we put our identity in or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's just one thing that we file in as part of our identity, and it's just not necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of like look at it and be like, yeah, this is mostly men do these things that I enjoy doing. Like this is kind of like my man thing, but obviously those things change depending on the needs.
Time, place, purpose.
Time,
I mean,
place, purpose.
who's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
man
yeah.
in Kentucky? Rural Kentucky might be different from an idea of manhood in like, I don't know, upscale Manhattan, right? Like what a man is.
Yeah.
Do you pay somebody to
Right.
do
You
your
take
plumbing?
like that man from Manhattan and you bring him to Kentucky and you're like,
they'll
hey,
be like, dude, you don't know how to like change your own oil? Like,
Right.
what's wrong with you?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
right.
You're not a man. And he's like, what? You don't know how to
Damn.
to file to count stocks? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
there's these different ideas of what it means.
and then women are like, wow, like same thing, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's different
they
versions.
would have, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think this is I think there's the same thing with womanhood, but I just want to talk about manhood today.
I like doing some things, and I know we got to go, but I would still say that, and I would love to see these areas kind of get more popular with women, and we'll talk about this next time you come by.
Yeah.
Role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering, things that used to be like super geeky and nerdy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they still are, but they're a little bit more popular now, but still like it's like 95% like guys.
Yeah. That was like one of my master's thesis was on stuff like that. Kind of this idea that like there's like this male nerd culture that kind of dominated the space for a long time, and nowadays you're starting to see that break down.
Your thesis goes into this
Yeah.
for your dissertation.
No, that was for
Oh,
my master's degree.
Master's degree. Okay,
Yeah.
man, there's too much to talk about with you in 1 hour.
I know.
Well, dude, let's wrap it up,
Yeah.
and we'll have you on again, and we'll talk about video games and manhood and
Okay. Yeah.
sex. No, thanks, Doug.
Right on.
All right.